Let's talk about the Democratic Republic of Congo, a nation that's once again on fire. Right now, Eastern DRC is descending into chaos, with reports confirming over 700 people brutally killed in Goma alone, the largest city in the region. But this isn't a new nightmare. This is the violent continuation of a war that never truly ended, one that traces back to the bloody upheavals of the 1990s. And while old wounds remain unhealed, a dangerous new chapter exploded in January 2025. On January 27, in a move that stunned the world, the rebel group known as M23 stormed and seized Goma, the capital of North Kivu province. What followed was bloodshed, displacement, and a terrifying sense of déjà vu. Who are the M23? They're not new. These fighters, primarily ethnic Tutsis, have haunted this region for years. Their reawakening is rooted in betrayal. They claim that the Congolese government broke a 2009 peace agreement that promised them army integration and protection for Tutsi communities from Hutu militias. The government's failure to follow through? That was the spark. By late 2024, that spark had become a wildfire. The rebels launched a sweeping offensive, capturing key territories across North and South Kivu. By January 23, they had strangled Goma's supply routes. By January 25th, they were knocking on its gates. 2 days later, they stormed in, leaving a trail of bodies, wreckage, and fear. But this isn't just an internal rebellion. This conflict has regional fingerprints all over it. The DRC government has openly accused Rwanda of backing the M23, and they're not alone. The United Nations has echoed this claim, further inflaming tensions between the two neighbors. Now the world is asking, is this more than just another Congolese conflict? Is this the first act in a wider regional war that could consume Central Africa? And while the battle for territory rages on the ground, another kind of battle is happening online. Creators and storytellers trying to make sense of it all. If you've ever wanted to bring powerful, relevant stories like this to life, whether you're experienced or just starting out, InVideo AI makes it easier than ever. Just type in your vision, and it turns it into compelling video. Edit with your voice, control it with text. No more steep learning curves, no more waiting. This isn't just about storytelling, it's about owning the narrative. And in times like this, the narrative matters more than ever. It removes all the guesswork and hands you the director's chair. With InVideo AI, your vision becomes reality without the stress of technical headaches. No more burning cash on editors, animators, or complex tools. Try it today for free using the link in the description below. Save hundreds and start telling your story your way. Now, let's get back to our story, because the chaos in Congo didn't start in 2024 or even 2004. To truly understand what's tearing the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo apart, you have to go back, way back, to the twisted foundations of colonialism, racial engineering, and the poisonous legacy it left behind. In the late 1800s, the Congo wasn't viewed as a nation. It wasn't seen as a home to ancient kingdoms or vibrant cultures. To King Leopold II of Belgium, it was a gold mine, one he claimed as personal property without ever stepping foot on the soil. The Congo Free State became a human slaughterhouse, where men, women, and even children had their limbs hacked off for failing to meet rubber quotas. It was industrial-scale barbarism, all in the name of profit. But the violence didn't stop when Belgium officially annexed the Congo in 1908. It simply changed form. Education was deliberately restricted. Ethnic groups were pitted against one another. Power was hoarded at the top, while ordinary Congolese were told they weren't ready to rule themselves. The system was built to break them and keep them broken. And just east of this already bleeding nation were the kingdoms of Rwanda and Burundi. Small, yes, but politically complex. These societies had their own hierarchies. The Tutsi aristocrats, often herders, and the Hutu majority, primarily farmers. But when the Europeans arrived, first the Germans, then the Belgians, they didn't just observe these dynamics, they weaponized them. The Tutsis, with their tall frames and sharp features, were labeled superior by colonial standards, a racist fantasy that declared them natural-born rulers. The Hutu were sidelined, deliberately denied access to education, power, and upward mobility. The Belgians handed out identity cards, formalizing a racial caste system as policy. What was once fluid social identity became a rigid, deadly hierarchy. But then came the 1960s. As African nations began gaining independence, Belgium panicked. The Tutsi, once their allies, were now a threat. So the Belgians flipped sides, empowering the Hutu majority and pushing them to overthrow the very system they had helped create. And that switch sparked something horrifying. In 1959, Rwanda erupted, not with celebration but with fire and blood. The Hutu revolution ignited decades of ethnic tension into a full-blown massacre. Thousands of Tutsis were slaughtered. Their homes were burned to the ground. Their centuries-old hold on power obliterated overnight. Those who survived? They fled, some into the dense jungles of Congo. Others into Uganda, where pockets of Congolese Tutsis had quietly lived for generations, now becoming host to a growing tide of refugees and rage. Meanwhile, to the west, Congo, still under Belgium's thumb, was inching toward its long-awaited independence. But that freedom came at a devastating cost. In the power vacuum that followed Belgium's retreat, chaos erupted. Patrice Lumumba, Congo's first democratically elected leader and Pan-African icon, was assassinated in a coup backed by Western intelligence. His vision of a united sovereign Congo died with him. In his place rose Mobutu Sese Seko, a CIA-backed strongman who renamed the country Zaire and ruled with a brutal kleptocratic fist for over 30 years. Back in Rwanda, the exiled Tutsis were biding their time. Their past lives may have been shattered, but their ambition remained sharp. Many joined a newly formed rebel group, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, RPF, a militarized movement determined to reclaim their home. Leading them was a calculating commander named Paul Kagame, a man who would come to shape not just Rwanda's future, but the fate of the entire Great Lakes region. In 1990, Kagame and the RPF invaded northern Rwanda, triggering the Rwandan Civil War. A fragile ceasefire in 1993 led to the Arusha Accords, a political compromise that was supposed to end the fighting. But peace was an illusion. On April 6, 1994, the illusion shattered. A jet carrying Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana and Burundian President Cyprien Taryamira, both ethnic Hutus, was shot down just before landing in Kigali. Within hours, the bloodletting began. The Rwandan genocide had begun. Over the next 100 days, nearly 1 million Tutsis, men, women, children, were hacked, burned, or beaten to death by their own neighbors. While the world watched in silence, Kagame's RPF pushed through the carnage, overthrew the Hutu regime, and seized control of the country. But the genocide's end in Rwanda marked the beginning of something far darker in Congo. Millions of Hutus, including those who orchestrated and carried out the genocide, fled across the border into eastern Zaire. There they hid in plain sight, embedded within refugee camps. They rearmed, they reorganized, and they waited. Mobutu, ever the opportunist, welcomed them as guests, allowing Hutu militias like the Interahamwe to set up bases in the forests of eastern Zaire. From these camps, they launched cross-border attacks, murdering ethnic Tutsis not just in Rwanda, but also within Zaire's own territory. Kagame saw it as an exit, and just like that, the stage was set for a new war, not just of tribes or rebels, but of governments, proxy forces, and a region sliding deeper into the abyss. It all hit a boiling point in November 1996, when Mobutu Sese Seko's crumbling regime signed its own death warrant, literally. His government issued a chilling ultimatum: all ethnic Tutsis must leave Zaire immediately or face execution. It was a genocidal echo of Rwanda's darkest days, now playing out on Congolese soil. But what Mobutu didn't realize was that this move would ignite a firestorm far greater than anything Rwanda had seen. From the jungles of eastern Zaire, a powerful alliance was already forming. Backed by Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni and Rwanda's Minister of Defense Paul Kagame, a rebel army quietly mobilized. Their goal wasn't just to crush the Hutu militias hiding in refugee camps. They were coming for Mobutu himself. In Kigali, Rwanda's capital, Kagame stood in his war room, cold, calculating, focused. On the table before him were maps, red-marked camps, intelligence files. The targets? The Interahamwe, the genocidal Hutu militias who had escaped justice by blending into UN refugee camps. But Kagame wasn't fooled. These weren't refugees. They were butchers in hiding. He turned to James Kabarebe, a trusted Rwandan general and close confidant. Kabarebe was given the green light to lead the invasion. And in October 1996, under the cover of night, Rwandan commandos slipped across the border into Zaire. What followed was nothing short of a geopolitical ambush. Publicly, the operation was sold as a Congolese rebellion led by a mysterious figure named Laurent Désiré Kabila, head of a group called the Alliance of Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Congo, AFDL. But in truth, the AFDL was a shell, a Rwandan front, a convenient smokescreen to distract global scrutiny. The war had a Congolese face, but the heart, brains, and firepower behind it came from Kigali. Kabarebe led the charge with surgical precision. Within weeks, the refugee camps were decimated. The Interahamwe were hunted and killed. But that was just phase one. The real prize was Mobutu Sese Seko. For over 30 years, Mobutu had ruled Zaire like a feudal monarch. He lived in obscene luxury, golden palaces, custom Concorde jets, and Swiss accounts fat with billions looted from his starving people. He was once the darling of the West, a Cold War puppet used to counter communism in Africa. But now the Cold War was over, and Mobutu was just a liability. Kagame saw an opening and he took it. With Uganda and Angola joining the offensive, Kagame's forces began an unstoppable westward march. Mobutu's army? It was barely an army at all, demoralized, unpaid, and bloated with corruption. One by one, Congolese cities fell without a fight. The advance was swift, relentless, unapologetic. By the time the world realized what was happening, Kagame's war machine was already knocking on Kinshasa's door. Bukavu, Goma, Kisangani, one by one they fell, like dominoes before an onrushing tide. In a matter of weeks, entire cities were erased from Mobutu's grasp. By March 1997, the once untouchable regime was collapsing like a decayed empire. Generals who once saluted him were now defecting. Loyalists were vanishing, allies ran for the exits. By the time Kagame's forces reached the outskirts of Kinshasa, there was no resistance, no last stand, and most notably, no Mobutu. The former strongman had already fled, sick with prostate cancer, stripped of power, and exiled to Morocco, where he would die in obscurity a few months later. His fall wasn't just a political defeat, it was the death of an era. On May 17, 1997, Laurent Désiré Kabila marched into Kinshasa as the new face of the nation. He declared the end of Zaire. From its ashes rose the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The war, they said, was over. Mobutu was gone. A new republic had been born. Kagame's forces had pulled off the unimaginable, marching from Rwanda's highlands to the very heart of Kinshasa in under a year. This, many believed, was the birth of a new Africa. But it was a lie, because even in victory, Kagame's mission wasn't complete. The Hutu extremists he had hunted, the genocidaires of 1994, weren't all dead. They had scattered, vanished into the jungles, into the villages, into the fabric of Congo itself. And Kagame's hunt would not stop just because a flag changed. But now, a new challenge emerged: Kabila himself. Once Kagame's handpicked successor, the rebel who had lived in obscurity for decades now stood at the helm of a vast, volatile nation. And it didn't take long for the cracks to show. The people called him a puppet, an instrument of Rwandan and Ugandan foreign interests, and the label stung. By 1998, Kabila snapped. He expelled all Rwandan and Ugandan military advisors, publicly humiliating Kagame. He abandoned his former patrons and turned instead to new partners: Angola, Zimbabwe, Namibia. It was more than just political maneuvering. It was a declaration of war on those who had once made him president. And the response? Immediate, devastating, explosive. In August 1998, Rwanda and Uganda launched a two-front invasion of Congo. The Second Congo War had begun. Once again, Kigali's war machine rolled westward, retaking cities like Goma and Bukavu in lightning speed. Ugandan forces surged from, and just like before, a rebel army was manufactured overnight, the Rally for Congolese Democracy, RCD, a carbon copy of the old AFDL. a new banner for Kagame's ambitions. But this time, Congo wasn't the same. Laurent Kabila wasn't Mobutu. He wasn't a bloated king hiding in gold palaces. He was a hardened guerrilla fighter, a man who had bled and crawled for power, and he wasn't about to lose it without a fight. He had bled for this land, but unlike Mobutu, Laurent Desire Kabila had something his predecessor never did. Loyalty bought not with gold but with sacrifice, real allies, real soldiers, men who would die for him, not just serve him. And so when Kagame and Museveni tried to storm Congo a second time, they found themselves entangled in something far more brutal than anticipated. The Second Congo War, which began as a swift surgical strike, exploded into Africa's deadliest and most widespread conflict ever. The alliances were staggering. On one side, Rwanda, Uganda, Burundi, backing their latest rebel proxy, the Rally for Congolese Democracy, RCD. Their goal? To unseat Kabila and install a more compliant puppet in Kinshasa. Part of that peace agreement required all rebels to lay down their arms and integrate into the national army. For some, it was salvation. For others, it felt like walking into an ambush. The Congolese Tutsi, many of whom had fought alongside Rwanda, felt betrayed. They feared being left to the mercy of the same Hutu militias that had once hunted them. And leading this simmering dissent was a man who carried war like a second skin, Laurent Nkunda. Nkunda refused to surrender. He had seen the peace treaties, he had read the promises. But he had also seen genocide, seen what happened when Tutsis put down their weapons and placed trust in governments that could not protect them. He accused the Congolese state of sheltering the enemy, the Interahamwe, the genocidal killers of 1994, and he vowed to defend his people with or without national backing. In 2004, Nkunda splintered off and created the CNDP, the National Congress for the Defense of the People. It was not a new war, but a continuation of an old wound, a wound that never healed. And to truly understand the rise of the M23 movement, you must first understand what this war meant. Not to Rwanda, not to Kinshasa, but to the Tutsi in the Congo, a people caught in a war they did not start, yet one they could not afford to lose. For generations, Tutsi communities called Eastern Congo home, long before the colonial powers ever carved Africa into artificial borders. But after the 1994 Rwandan genocide, their world turned into a trap. Hundreds of thousands of Rwandan Hutus, many with blood on their hands, fled into Congo's vast forests, turning it into a shadow war zone. What followed was not peace, but vengeance. The genocidaires, who once swung machetes in Kigali, now roamed Congo's jungles, rebranded as the FDLR, Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda. These militias didn't stop killing. They shifted targets, torching villages, murdering civilians, and hunting down Congolese Tutsis. And the Congolese government did nothing. That's when Laurent Nkunda stepped in. Backed silently by Rwanda, Nkunda's CNDP became the unofficial army of the Congolese Tutsi, battling both the FDLR and the Congolese National Army. His forces carved out strongholds, pushing government troops back, and by 2008, he had humiliated the regime by capturing Goma, the capital of North Kivu. But power always comes with a price. Nkunda had become too bold, too visible, and Rwanda's reputation was now under fire. In 2009, in a stunning twist, Rwanda betrayed its own man. Nkunda was arrested and placed under house arrest. In exchange, Congo promised to finally deal with the FDLR. The CNDP was absorbed into the Congolese army. Their war was supposed to be over. But in Congo, wars don't end. Not when betrayal is currency and power always shifts hands. The government broke its promises. CNDP fighters were marginalized, betrayed, and worst of all, the FDLR was never disarmed. Attacks on Tutsi villages continued. That betrayal lit a fuse. In April 2012, ex-CNDP soldiers mutinied. This time their leader was Bosco Ntaganda, a commander so brutal he was known as the Terminator. He and his loyalists declared a new rebellion, the March 23 movement, or M23, named after the peace agreement Congo had failed to honor. And just like a page ripped from a bloody history book, Goma fell again. The Congolese army collapsed, again. Tutsi communities cheered. The government panicked. The world took notice. Rwanda was accused of pulling the strings, again. The United Nations threatened sanctions. Pressure built. The UN and other investigative reports point to a dark truth. Rwanda is profiting from looting, funneling minerals out of Congo through rebel proxies like M23, then laundering them through Rwandan exports. Control North and South Kivu, and you control the gold veins of the world. Control M23, and you control Kivu. But the motivations don't end with money. This is also about power. Under Paul Kagame, Rwanda has transformed itself from a post-genocide state into a regional military heavyweight. In a world where might still makes right, Kagame is rewriting the rules. Rwanda trains African peacekeepers, deploys troops to global hotspots, and negotiates security deals while quietly fueling chaos next door. The Tutsi-Hutu ethnic fault line is also still very real and very dangerous. M23 is a Tutsi rebel force, many of whose members see themselves as defenders of their persecuted kin in the DRC. And Kagame, a Tutsi president with a history rooted in survival, sees M23 as more than allies. They are extensions of Rwanda's identity and power. So, is the plan working? In the short term? Absolutely. Rwanda maintains a shadow grip on eastern Congo. It profits, it postures, it dominates. But in the long term, that's a different question entirely. Because every empire built on stolen earth and silence eventually cracks. Long term, that's where the real storm brews. The tide is shifting. And for Rwanda, the winds of international scrutiny are getting colder by the day. South Africa and Angola have now entered the fray, not just with words, but with boots on the ground. And it's not symbolic, it's serious. In January 2025, the death of 13 South African soldiers, allegedly killed in an M23 ambush, sent shockwaves through the continent. These weren't just any casualties. It was one of South Africa's deadliest military losses in years.